As we look at our human history, it is interesting to point out that there are various versions of the creation of man and the flood story, and while each appear to vary due to culture or religion, it is quite striking how similar they are. This video is titled The Epic of Atrahasis, the Babylonian myth known to the ancients as Enuma Ilu Awelam, when the gods were man, which pretty much is how the story or poem begins. It tells the wondrous story of the creation of mankind, of the attempts of the king of the gods, Enlil, to reduce the overpopulation that resulted from its unchecked reproduction by plague, drought, famine, and deluge. And it tells of the remedies taken by the gods to keep mankind's future numbers in check. It was reconstructed years ago by W.G. Lambert and A.R. Millard, as well as Gromberg and Durand, who have contributed to ciphering additional fragments of whose contributions have made it possible to dive into these texts. Historically, mankind has been able to preserve some artifacts dating from the earlier recorded written words dating from the Bronze Age. Make sure to subscribe to our community here as I begin to build our library with stories of creation and the Great Flood from ancient civilizations, recounted via stories, epic poems, hymns, myths, cult, and religious texts. Welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. In this video, I invite you to time travel with me back in time as we set our time machine to around 1700 BC, the area of ancient Mesopotamia, deep into Babylonia. You can visit the description of this video to jump ahead to the narration of the Epic of Atrahasis, or simply sit back as I share some of my observations. Also, I've added my research links in the description for your preview. As we cross through the veil of time, we see scribes etching away at some cuneiform clay tablets. Before us, the best surviving text of the Atra-Hasis epic is being written on 3 tablets in Akkadian, the language of ancient Babylon. And these Assyrian scribes are sharing a grand poem, the epic tale of Atra-Hasis. Beyond the literary aspect that scholars point out, my interest in this work is to get a glimpse of cultural, political, spiritual values of that time, as is usually possible for anyone with eyes to see and ears to hear, because not all history is in the history books, but it's tucked away neatly in songs, in poems, in hymns, and other texts. Keep an eye for these concepts as they're being brought to the forefront. You will see political hierarchy, genetic engineering, use of magic, incantations, conjuring, rituals, and sacrifice. I did mention genetic engineering, since we're talking Bronze Age, which one would think it devoid of today's science and technology. It will be interesting to read your comments on that. For those familiar with the story of Noah's Ark, a story which is part of the Abrahamic canon, seems to have elements that appear in the Epic of Atrahasis, and according to many scholars, the legend of the Great Flood almost certainly has pre-biblical origins rooted in the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia. The story of Atrahasis is a Babylonian story of the flood and a precursor to the flood story in the Gilgamesh epic, Tablet 11, which I am looking forward to adding to our virtual library. These offer some evidence on the relationship between the Anunnaki and the IGIGI. And this could be the first question of many. Who were the Anunnaki and the IGIGI? Among its complex religion, which involved multiple gods called the Anunnaki, the Sumerian civilization existed from 4100 BCE until around 1750 BCE. The name Sumer meant land of the civilized kings, the beginning of city-states, so to speak. The Sumerians were one of the first groups to divide time into hours and minutes. The IGIGI, interchangeably also the IGIGI, were a lower rank of gods. They were a servant class to the Anunnaki, which existed before human beings were created. They rebelled against the Anunnaki, which we'll get more details in the narration part of the poem. I was looking at some of the illustrations and noticed the artwork depiction in some of the artifacts showed what appeared to be a flying object. Others had orbs with projections. If they had technology for flying machines, if that was what they were showing, why could they not expand on that technology? And were the orbs some energy source? Then there were other drawings where people were standing in front of an object that some say it could be the tree of life, but it seemed to coincide with the story of creation when they mentioned that the clay was divided into 14 pieces, 7 to create women and 7 to create men. The object had 14 spokes, not counting the top one, 7 on one side and 7 on the other. Could that have been an incubation machine? Then another illustration showed some type of spire object, and I wondered if that was a mechanism that was used for creating viruses or other diseases that they were conjuring to deal with the overpopulation. I may be jumping ahead of myself. It's just so much going on in this literary work. The Anunnaki gods were worshipped by the Sumerians of ancient Mesopotamia, and scholars state that the Anunnaki were winged deities who lived up in the heavens and came down to earth to decide on people's destiny. Many of these findings is based on ancient carvings depicting deities of ancient Mesopotamia. Some had wings, some wore horned caps, and others had bird faces. It would be important to note that the Sumerians are given credit to be the first who began recording transactions on clay tablets dating back to around 3200 BC. This is one of the first oldest recorded flood story in the history of mankind. And it's important to note here that it doesn't mean that there weren't other flood stories, but this is like one of the first that was actually written down and preserved in that way. Before that, our history, our human history, was passed on orally. This preserved literary work serves to provide us with an insight that even as early as the Bronze Age, there were assurances that individual human suffering had some greater purpose or meaning and was not simply senseless pain. The Atra-Hasis, like the story of Noah's Ark, can be summarized as a tale of hope and of faith and a deeper meaning to the tragedies of the human experience. Atra-Hasis was a Sumerian king of Shuruppak before the flood. According to some scholars, King Atra-Hasis is listed in the Sumerian king list as one of the monarchs who lived before the deluge, but his historicity cannot otherwise be confirmed. The oldest known copy of the Epic of Atrahasis can be dated by its scribal identification to the reign of Hammurabi's great-grandson, Ammisaduqa, between 1646 and 1626 BCE. But also various old Babylonian fragments exist. As I noted earlier, Sumerians were one of the first groups to divide time into hours and minutes. And in this literary work, I noticed the authors wanted us to have an idea of time when they were describing the span of time between dealing with issues of overpopulation, which they said that it took 3 epochs before they had to deal with the issue again. So how long is an epoch? Way long. An epoch is said to be the smallest unit of geological time and lasts several million years. If you are interested in learning what epoch we're in, I left you a link in the description from National Geographic. Now, these Assyrian scribes are motioning us to keep our voices down, so I didn't think we were talking that loud. Let me see if I can peek over their shoulders. Okay, the first tablet contains a creation myth explaining the origin of humankind, and it's introducing the Sumerian gods by when gods were in the ways of men, according to its opening line. The gods are casting lots to divide territories, so heaven is ruled by Anu, earth by Enlil, and the freshwater sea by Enki. Enlil assigns junior gods to do farm labor and maintain the rivers and canals, but after 40 years, they rebel and refuse to do hard labor. I don't know why, but something about that number 40 sounds familiar. Enki, the wise counselor, advises against punishing the rebels and suggests that humans be created to do the work. The mother goddess, Nintu, also referred to as the goddess Mami. So here I have a question. Is this the first time we hear this word introduced into the world, Mami, and associated with mother? She is assigned the task of creating humans, and creates humankind by shaping clay figurines mixed with the flesh and blood of a slain minor deity, Wela or Awilu, who was sacrificed for this purpose. Now, how would you like to be that sacrificial lamb, so to speak? Hey, it's for a greater cause. So after 10 months, a specially made womb breaks open and humans are born. Note that in the creation of man, it was important that they add the essence of one of the gods, creating a bind between man and God. So there's also a description how each god spat into the clay. So did that mean that there is some knowledge passed from each of the gods into humanity through this, the DNA of the spit? Well, it seems they had some serious science back then. So in the story of Christianity, Adam's life was spared because he had to give up only a rib to create Eve. Seems that the Sumerians needed a whole being to create multiple humans. Also, Nintu is the same person as Mami, as Inanna and Ishtar. Ishtar is recognized as the Babylonian goddess of love and war. And it is in Table 1 that some standards are set for bearing children, and a class of women are designated as priestesses, also midwives, and they are forbidden from having children, though not from marriage. They additionally act as wet nurses too, and they're referred here as the Kadistu. So it seems Ninurta is a goddess, also a priestess with medical knowledge, because the gods seek her out to create man. And there are clay tablets illustrating her with what appears to be like 2 female reproductory organs on each side of her. That leads to the next question. How did they know what those organs look like and their function? Yet, at the same time, there appeared to be ignorance on how creation happened because the gods thought she could do it on her own. She knew otherwise. Let's take a look at the next tablet. Tablet 2 deals with overpopulation and plagues, and Atra-Hasis is also introduced. Tiring of the incessant noise, the god Enlil sends plague, famine, and drought at interval periods mentioned by epics to reduce the population. Population control? Does this sound familiar? Science today offers birth control. The flu season. Is that a coincidence? And what about the occasional viruses that somehow are leaked out of laboratories? What a novelty. Enki, who often takes the side of mankind in Babylonian mythology, intervenes to help humans stave off these disasters. So in response to the prayers of Atra-Hasis, he provides the key to survival, saying that prayers not to one's personal deity, but to the specific god responsible for the calamity, such as Nabtar was assigned to plague and Hadad for rain, etc. I'd like to mention that there are sections missing to this epic literary work, so you will notice throughout the narration a bit of long pauses, signaling the many gaps throughout. Alan Ralph Millard submitted his thesis in 1966 to the University of London on this topic and provided many resources and individuals involved in the transliteration and translation of these ancient words. And like I mentioned, I've added links for your review, and it is quite impressionable realizing that these words of an ancient civilization are getting a heartbeat again when we read them. With that said, it is important to note that Tablet 2 is badly damaged, but ends with Enlil's decision to destroy mankind altogether with a flood, and Enki bound by an oath to keep the plan a secret. Moving on to Tablet 3, it features an account of the flood, which was also adapted in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So in it, Enki, the god of water, warns Atra-Hasis of the coming flood. Enki devises a way to warn Atra-Hasis without technically breaking his oath, and speaking to the reed wall of Atra-Hasis' house, which I thought was really cute. This is suggesting of an oracle, and he advises Atra-Hasis to dismantle his house and build a boat to escape the flood. And Enki tells Atra-Hasis that the boat will need multiple decks and must be of great size. As mentioned earlier, this is said to predate the biblical Noah. I found also interesting that they also mentioned beer. So which apparently humans knew how to ferment these grains, right, hops, to make beer. So hail to Dionysus, and on with our Bacchus celebration. Oh wait, that's a different culture. I was amused with that section, implying that the gods realized the implications of the flood, as there would be no one to serve them and take care of their needs. The flood ends and Atra-Hasis descends from the boat to offer sacrifices to the gods, and it seems that they were happy that there was food for them. So Enlil is enraged and outraged to discover that humans had survived. Enki denies breaking his oath and argues that, hey, this was because he wanted to ensure that life was preserved. Enki and Enlil eventually agree that other means must be devised for controlling the human population. So it seems to suggest that prior to the flood, humans lived forever. Either way, they both agreed that all people must eventually die. Moreover, Enki instructs Nintu to arrange it that a third of human pregnancies will not succeed, as a demon will snatch the baby from its mother's lap. This is where we are introduced to this idea of demon. And I simply wonder, were these demons simply the gods with a different title? Many scholars believe this story of the flood was directly adapted for the use in the Epic of Gilgamesh, arguing that some of the characters of each literary work play similar role. We will learn more in upcoming videos, and that adaptation strengthens the argument that the flood story in Gilgamesh comes directly from the Epic of Atrahasis. I've read that no recognized scholar working in the present day maintains the argument that there was ever a worldwide flood, such as Atra-Hasis and other accounts, including the story of Noah and his ark in the biblical book of Genesis. The Mesopotamian scholar Stephanie Dalley writes, quote, "No flood deposits are found in 3rd millennia strata, and Archbishop Usher's date for the flood of 2349 BC, which was calculated by using numbers in Genesis at face value and which did not recognize how highly schematic biblical chronology is for such early times, is now out of the question." End quote. So if anyone out there wants to comment on this and provide sources, either way, we can continue the conversation. As I read these texts, my first approach is seeing things as if it were a crime scene. And that approach has a lot to do with my police background, and that does not mean that I'm looking for something nefarious. It simply means we must first observe everything as it is, for what it is, because often that is what is. From there, we can develop a line of inquiry that allows us to go back and ask why something is where it is and follow that trail. See where it takes us. When we get into the narrative, we will notice that there are no humans mentioned, which sets us up to ask questions. Was the planet devoid of humans? And then we go on to the beings being here. They were digging. Why were they digging out riverbeds? Was it really to create irrigation, or were they digging out riverbeds in search of gold or other resources? Were they looking for resources? If it was for irrigation, did these inhabitants possess the knowledge of agriculture? And they mentioned greater gods. Where were or where are the greater gods? How did they get here? Did or do the greater gods still commune with humanity? And the minor gods, where are they? We are told that the minor gods, or they call them the junior gods, rebel and they want someone else to do the work. So does this mean that these junior gods were left here with no way of getting back home, wherever that home may be? Then there's the replacement of the work labor. Genetic engineering concept comes when the divine assembly or the greater gods agree to kill one of the IGIGI, lesser gods, and makes a substitute worker. But they need a womb to make it happen, and apparently the mother goddess says she can't create it by herself. Clearly she appears to have some idea how creation takes place because she requests the aid of Enki. Now, For this new race, Enki needs to provide clay. Let's remember, scholars predate the Epic of Atrahasis before the Bible. So Enki ordains or sets some holy orders on how the purification will take place, so that as they sacrifice the flesh of this junior god and the blood of the dead god and mix it with the clay, it will not sink into oblivion, but it will connect its spirit, they called it a shade or ghost, to the new flesh. That's a lot going on in there from a scientific point or from a mysticism. So yeah, seriously, some metaphysical science right there happening. Yes, indeed. One could infer that by the use of the word ordain, it would mean that Enki was a priest of some sort. And that gives rise to the question, were the priests also doctors and scientists? An article from PBS stated that science and religion became separate domains around the 18th century. That's why in the past it was not unusual to see a priest being also an advisor to the king, and also the advisor in the capacity of legal matters, scientific matters, and medical, as well as spiritual. So in this version of the story of creation, Goddess Mami then establishes a pattern for the continuance of humanity by procreation, appointing a period of 10 months in incubation in the womb. So we move on to the next tablet that deals with overpopulation. And here we're introduced to worship and prayer. This is where Enki advises cessation of prayer and worship to one's God, but now you have to go find the God that you're having an issue with and pray to them. So one can't help but notice the similarities between Atra-Hasis and Noah, as we're told of the building of the boat, as well as 7 days and nights that the flood was continuing. Unfortunately, a large gap in the tablet breaks the narrative there, and when it resumes, Atra-Hasis has emerged from his boat and is sacrificing to the gods, who apparently were starving because during that flood time there was no one to care for them. And so again, we're given a glimpse of cult religion, of rites, of sacrifices, of prayer offerings, hierarchy, and organization. So in a nutshell, the Epic of Atrahasis describes the events resulting in the creation of the human race, the means of that creation, its unexpected consequences culminating in the divine decision to destroy mankind by the flood, and the subsequent reordering of human affairs. With my comments now behind us, let's move on to Atra-Hasis translation by Stephanie M. Dalley. Tablet 1. When the gods, instead of man, did the work, bore the loads, the gods' load was too great, the work too hard, the trouble too much. The great Anunnaki made the IGIGI carry the workload sevenfold. Anu, their father, was king, their counselor warrior Enlil, their chamberlain was Ninurta, their canal controller Enlil. They took the box of lots, cast the lots, the gods made the division. Anu went up to the sky, and Enlil took the earth for his people. The bolt which bars the sea was assigned to far-sighted Enki. When Anu had gone up to the sky, and the gods of the Apsu had gone below, the Anunnaki of the sky made the IGIGI bear the workload. The gods had to dig out canals, had to clear channels, the lifelines of the land. The IGIGI had to dig out canals, had to clear channels, the lifelines of the land. The gods dug out the Tigris River bed, and then dug out the Euphrates. In the deep, they set up the Apsu of the land. Inside it, raised its top. Of all the mountains, they were counting the years of loads. the great marsh. They were counting the years of loads. For 3,600 years they bore the excess, hard work night and day. They groaned and blamed each other, grumbled over the masses of excavated soil. Let us confront the Chamberlain, and get him to relieve us of our hard work. Come, let us carry the Lord. The counselor of gods, the warrior, from his dwelling. Come, let us carry Eliel, the counselor of gods, the warrior, from his dwelling. Then Alia made his voice heard, and spoke to the gods his brother. Come, let us carry the counselor of gods, the warrior, from his dwelling. Come, let us carry Eliel, the counselor of gods, the warrior, from his dwelling. Now cry battle. Let us mix fight with battle. The gods listened to his speech, set fire to their tools, put aside their spades for fire, their loads for the fire god. They flared up. When they reached the gate of warrior Eliel's dwelling, it was night, the middle watch. The house was surrounded. The god had not realized it was night, the middle watch. Ekur was surrounded. Eliel had not realized. Yet Kalkal was attentive and had it closed. He held the lock and watched the gate. Kalkal roused Nusku. They listened to the noise of the IGIGI. Then Nusku roused his master, made him get out of bed. My lord, your house is surrounded. A rabble is running round your door. Eliel, your house is surrounded. A rabble is running around your door. Eliel had weapons brought to his dwelling. Eliel made his voice heard and spoke to the vizier Nusku. Nusku, bar your door. Take up your weapons and stand in front of me. Nusku barred his door, took up his weapons, and stood in front of Eliel. Nusku made his voice heard and spoke to the warrior Eliel. Oh, my lord, your face is sallow as tamarisk. Why do you fear your own sons? Oh, Eliel, your face is sallow as tamarisk. Why do you fear your own sons? Send for Anu to be brought down to you. Have Enki fetched into your presence. He sent for Anu to be brought down to him. Enki was fetched into his presence. Anu, king of the sky, was present. Enki, king of the Apsu, attended. The great Anunnaki were present. Eliel got up, and the case was put. Eliel made his voice heard, and spoke to the great gods. Is it against me that they have risen? Shall I do battle? What did I see with my own eyes? A rabble was running round my door. Anu made his voice heard, and spoke to the warrior Eliel. Let Nusku go out, and find out word of the IGIGI, who have surrounded your door. A command. 2. Eliel made his voice heard, and spoke to the vizier Nusku. Nusku, open your door, take up your weapons, and stand before me. In the assembly of all the gods, bow, then stand and tell them. Your father Anu, your counselor warrior Eliel, your chamberlain Ninurta, and your canal controller Enugi have sent me to say, who is in charge of the rabble? Who is in charge of the fighting? Who declared war? Who ran to the door of Eliel? Nusku opened his door, took up his weapons, went before Eliel, in the assembly of all the gods. He bowed, then stood and told the message. Your father Anu, your counselor warrior Enlil, your chamberlain Ninurta, and your canal controller Anuji have sent me to say, who is in charge of the rabble? Who is in charge of the fighting? Who declared war? Who ran to the door of Enlil? Enlil, every single one of us gods declared war. We have put a stop to the digging. The load is excessive. It is killing us. Our work is too hard, the trouble too much. So every single one of us gods has agreed to complain to Enlil. Nusku took his weapons, went, and returned to Enlil. My lord, you sent me to. I went. I explained. Saying, every single one of us gods declared war. We have put a stop to the digging. The load is excessive. It is killing us. Our work is too hard, the trouble too much. So every single one of us gods has agreed to complain to Enlil. Enlil listened to that speech. His tears flowed. Enlil spoke guardedly, addressed the warrior Anu. Noble one, take a decree with you to the sky. Show your strength. While the Anunnaki are sitting before you, call up one god and let them cast him for destruction. Anu made his voice heard and spoke to the gods, his brothers. What are we complaining of? Their work was indeed too hard. Their trouble was too much. Every day the earth resounded. The warning signal was loud enough. We kept hearing the noise. Do tasks. While the Anunnaki are sitting before you, and while Belet Ili, the womb goddess, is present, call up one and cast him for destruction. Anu made his voice heard and spoke to Nusku. Nusku, open your door, take up your weapons, bow in the assembly of the great gods, then stand and tell them, your father Anu, your counselor warrior Enlil, your chamberlain Ninurta, and your canal controller Anuji have sent me to say, who is in charge of the rabble? Who will be in charge of battle? Which god started the war? A rabble was running around my door. When Nusku heard this, he took up his weapons, bowed in the assembly of the great gods, then stood and told them, your father Anu, your counselor warrior Enlil, your chamberlain Ninurta, and your canal controller Anuji have sent me to say, who is in charge of the rabble? Who is in charge of the fighting? Which god started the war? A rabble was running around Enlil's door. Ea made his voice heard and spoke to the gods, his brothers. Why are we blaming them? Their work was too hard. Their trouble was too much. Every day the earth resounded. The warning signal was loud enough. We kept hearing the noise. There is Bel-Eli, the womb goddess, is present. Let her create primeval man, so that he may bear the yoke. So that he may bear the yoke, the work of Eliel. Let man bear the load of the gods. Bel-Eli, the womb goddess, is present. Let the womb goddess create offspring, and let man bear the load of the gods. They called up the goddess, asked the midwife of the gods, Wise mommy, you are the womb goddess, to be the creator of mankind. Create primeval man, that he may bear the yoke. Let him bear the yoke, the work of Eliel. Let him bear the load of the gods. Nintu made her voice heard and spoke to the great gods. It is not proper for me to make him. The work is Enki's. He makes everything pure. If he gives me clay, then I will do it. Enki made his voice heard and spoke to the great gods. On the 1st, 7th, and 15th of the month, I shall make a purification by washing. Then one god should be slaughtered, and the gods can be purified by immersion. Nintu shall mix clay with his flesh and his blood. Then a god and a man will be mixed together in clay. Let us hear the drumbeat forever after. Let a ghost come into existence from the god's flesh. Let her proclaim it as his living sign, and let the ghost exist so as not to forget the slain god. They answered yes in the assembly, the great Anunnaki who assigned the fates. On the 1st, 7th, and 15th of the month, he made a purification by washing. Elewala, who had intelligence, they slaughtered in their assembly. Nintu mixed clay with his flesh and blood. They heard the drumbeat forever after. A ghost came into existence from the god's flesh, and she, Nintu, proclaimed it as his living sign. The ghost existed so as not to forget the slain god. After she had mixed that clay, she called up the Anunnaki, the great gods. The IGIGI, the great gods, spat spittle upon the clay. Mami made her voice heard and spoke to the great gods. I have carried out perfectly the work that you ordered of me. You have slaughtered a god together with his intelligence. I have relieved you of your hard work. I have imposed your load on man. You have bestowed noise on mankind. I have undone the fetter and granted freedom. They listened to the speech of hers and were freed from anxiety and kissed her feet. We used to call you Mommy, but now your name shall be Mistress of all gods. Far-sighted Anki and wise Mommy went into the room of fate. The womb goddesses were assembled. He trod the clay in her presence. She kept reciting an incantation, for Enki, staying in her presence, made her recite it. When she had finished her incantation, she pinched off 14 pieces of clay and set 7 pieces on the right, 7 on the left. Between them she put down a mud brick. She made use of a reed, opened it to cut the umbilical cord, called up the wise and knowledgeable womb goddesses, 7 and 7, 7 created males, 7 created females. For the womb goddesses is creator of fate. He and them 2 by 2, and them 2 by 2 in her presence. Mommy made these rules for people. In the house of a woman who is giving birth, the mud brick shall be put down for 7 days. Bel-Eli, wise Mommy, shall be honored. The midwife shall rejoice in the house of the woman who gives birth, and when the woman gives birth to the baby, the mother of the baby shall sever herself. A man to a girl. Her bosom, a beard can be seen on a young man's cheek. In gardens and waysides, a wife and her husband choose each other. The womb goddesses were assembled, and Nintu was present. They counted the months, called up the 10th month as the term of fates. When the 10th month came, she slipped in a staff and opened the womb. Her face was glad and joyful. She covered her head, performed the midwifery, put on her belt, said a blessing. She made a drawing in flour and put down a mud brick. I myself created it, my hands made it. The midwife shall rejoice in the house of the Kaditstu priestess. Wherever a woman gives birth and the baby's mother severs herself, the mud brick shall be put down for 9 days. Nintu, the womb goddess, shall be honored. She shall call their mommy. She shall, the womb goddesses, lay down the linen cloth. When the bed is laid out in their house, a wife and her husband shall choose each other. Ishtar shall rejoice in the wife-husband relationship in the father-in-law's house. Celebration shall last for 9 days, and they shall call Ishtar Ishara. On the 15th day, the fixed time of fate, she shall call. A man cleaned the home. The son to his father. They sat, and he was carrying. He saw Elil. They took hold of, made new picks and spades, made big canals to feed people and sustain the gods. 600 years, less than 600 passed, and the country became too wide, the people too numerous. The country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The god grew restless at their racket. Elil had to listen to their noise. He addressed the great gods. The noise of mankind has become too much. I am losing sleep over their racket. Give the order that Surupu disease shall break out. Now there was one, Atra-Hasis, whose ear was open to his god Enki. He would speak with his god, and his god would speak with him. Atra-Hasis made his voice heard and spoke to his lord. How long will the gods make us suffer? Will they make us suffer illness forever? Enki made his voice heard and spoke to his servant. Call the elders, the senior men. Start an uprising in your own house. Let heralds proclaim. Let them make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods. Do not pray to your goddesses. But search out the door of Namtara. Bring a baked loaf into his presence. May the flour offering reach him. May he be shamed by the presence and wipe away his hand. Atra-Hasis took the order, gathered the elders to his door. Atra-Hasis made his voice heard and spoke to the elders. I have called the elders, the senior men. Start an uprising in your own house. Let heralds proclaim. Let them make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods. Do not pray to your goddesses. Search out the door of Namtara. Bring a baked loaf into his presence. May the flour offering reach him. May he be shamed by the presence and wipe away his hand. The elders listened to his speech. They built a temple for Namtara in the city. Heralds proclaimed. They made a loud noise in the land. They did not revere their god, did not pray to their goddess, but searched out the door of Namtara, brought a baked loaf into his presence. The flour offering reached him, and he was shamed by the presence and wiped away his hand. The Surupu disease left them. The gods went back to their regular offerings. 600 years, less than 600 passed. 600 years, less than 600 passed, and the country became too wide, the people too numerous. The country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The god grew restless at their clamor. Enlil had to listen to their noise. He addressed the great gods. The noise of mankind has become too much. I am losing sleep over their racket. Cut off food supplies to the people. Let the vegetation be too scant for their hunger. Let Adad wipe away his rain. Below, let no flood water flow from the springs. Let wind go. Let it strip the ground bare. Let clouds gather, but not drop rain. Let the field yield a diminished harvest. Let the Nisaba stop up her bosom. No happiness shall come to them. Let there be dejected. Call the elders, the senior men. Start an uprising in your house. Let heralds proclaim. Let them make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods. Do not pray to your goddess. Search out the door of Adad. Bring a baked loaf into his presence. May the flour offering reach him. May he be shamed by the presence and wipe away his hand. Then he will make a mist form in the morning, and in the night he will stand out and make a dewdrop. Deliver the field of its produce ninefold, like a thief. They built a temple for Adad in the city. Ordered heralds to proclaim and make a loud noise in the land. They did not revere their gods, did not pray to their goddess, but searched out the door of Adad, brought a baked loaf into this presence. The floor offering reached him. He was shamed by the presence and wiped away his hand. He made mist form in the morning, and in the night he stole out and made dewdrop, delivered the field of its produce ninefold like a thief. Then drought left him. The gods went back to their regular offerings. Not 3 epochs had passed. The country became too wide, the people too numerous. The country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The gods grew restless at their noise, and Enlil organized his assembly again, addressed the gods, his sons. The noise of mankind has become too much. Sleep cannot overtake me because of the racket. Command that Anu and Adad keep the air above earth locked. Sin and Nergal keep the middle earth locked. As for the vault that bars the sea, Ea with his Lahmu creatures shall keep it locked. He ordered, and Anu and Adad kept the air above earth locked. Sin and Nergal kept the middle earth locked. As for the bolt bars that bars the sea, Ea with his Lahmu creatures kept it locked. Then the very wise man Atra-Hasis wept daily. He would carry a masuka offering along the riverside pasture. Although the irrigation water was silent, halfway through the night he offered a sacrifice. As sleep began to overtake him, he addressed the irrigation water. May the irrigation water take it. May the river carry it. May the gift be placed in front of Ea, my lord. May Ea see it and think of me. So may I see a dream in the night. When he had sent the message by water, he sat facing the river. He wept. The man wept, facing the river, as his plea went down to the Apsu. Then Ea heard his voice. He summoned his Lahmu creatures and addressed them. Above, rain did not fill the canals. Below, flood water did not flow from the springs. Earth's womb did not give birth. No vegetation sprouted. People did not look. The dark pasture land was bleached. The broad countryside filled up with alkali. In the first year, they ate old grain. In the second year, they depleted the storehouse. When the third year came, their looks were changed by starvation, their faces covered with scabs, like malt. They stayed alive by life. Their faces looked sallow. They went out in public hunched, their well-set shoulders slouched, their upstanding bearing bowed. They took a message from Atra-Hasis to the gods in the front of the assembly of the great gods. They stood, and the orders of Atra-Hasis they repeated in front of. 600 years, less than 600 years passed. The country became too wide, the people too numerous. He grew restless at their noise. Sleep could not overtake him because of their racket. Enlil organized his assembly, addressed the gods his sons. The noise of mankind has become too much. I have become restless at their noise. Sleep cannot overtake me because of their racket. Give the order that Shuruppak disease shall break out. Let Namtar put an end to their noise straight away. Let sickness, headache, Shuruppak, Asaku blow into them like a storm. They gave the order, and Shuruppak disease did break out. Namtar put an end to their noise straight away. Sickness, headache, Shuruppak, Asaku blew into them like a storm. The thoughtful man, Atra-Hasis, kept his ear open to his master Ea. He would speak with his god, and his god, Ea, would speak with him. Atra-Hasis made his voice heard and spoke. Said to Ea his master, O Lord, people are grumbling. Your sickness is consuming the country. O Lord, Ea, people are grumbling. Sickness from the gods is consuming the country. Since you created us, you ought to cut off sickness, headache, Shuruppak, and Asaku. Ea made his voice heard and spoke, said to Atra-Hasis, Order the heralds to proclaim, to make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods. Do not pray to your goddesses. Withhold his rites. The flower as an offering. To her presence say a prayer. The presence, his hand. Enlil organized his assembly, addressed the gods his sons. You are not to inflict disease on them again. Even though the people have not diminished, they are more than before. I have become restless at their noise. Sleep cannot overtake me because of their racket. Cut off food from the people. Let vegetation be too scant for their stomachs. Let Adad on high make his rain scarce. Let him block below and not raise flood water from the springs. Let the field decrease its yield. Let Nasaba turn away her breast. Let the dark fields become white. Let the broad countryside breed alkali. Let earth clamp down her womb, so that no vegetation sprouts, no grain grows. Let Asaku be inflicted on the people. Let the womb be too tight to let a baby out. They cut off food for the people. Vegetation became too scant for their stomachs. Adad on high made his rain scarce, blocked below, and did not raise flood water from the springs. The field decreased its yield. Nisaba turned away her breast. The dark fields became white. The broad countryside bred alkali. Earth clamped down her womb. No vegetation sprouted, no grain grew. Asaku was inflicted on the people. The womb was too tight to let a baby out. Ea kept guard over the bolt that bars the sea, together with his Lahmu heroes. Above, Adad made his rain scarce, blocked below, and did not raise flood water from the springs. The field decreased its yield. Nisaba turned away her breast. The dark fields became white. The broad countryside bred alkali. Earth clamped down her womb. No vegetation sprouted. No grain grew. Asaku was inflicted on the people. The womb was too tight to let a baby out. When the second year arrived, they had depleted the storehouse. When the third year arrived, the people's looks were changed by starvation. When the fourth year arrived, their upstanding bearing bowed, their well-set shoulders slouched. People went out in public hunched over. When the fifth year arrived, a daughter would eye her mother coming in. A mother would not even open her door to her daughter. A daughter would watch the scales at the sale of her mother. A mother would watch the scales at the sale of her daughter. When the sixth year arrived, they served up a daughter for a meal, served up a son for food. Only 1 or 2 households were left. Their faces were covered with scabs, like malt. People stayed alive by life. The thoughtful man, Atra-Hasis, kept his ear open to his master Ea. He would speak with his god, and his god Ea would speak with him. He left the door of his god, put his bed right beside the river, for even the canals were quite silent. When the second year arrived, they had depleted the storehouse. When the third year arrived, the people's look were changed by starvation. When the fourth year arrived, their upstanding bearing bowed, their well-set shoulders slouched. People went out in public hunched over. When the fifth year arrived, a daughter would eye her mother coming in. A mother would not even open her door to her daughter. A daughter would watch the scales at the sale of her mother. A mother would watch the scales at the sale of her daughter. When the sixth year arrived, they served up a daughter for a meal, served up a son for food. Only 1 or 2 households were left. Their faces were covered with scabs, like malt. The people stayed alive by life. They took a message, entered and the order of Atra-Hasis, saying, "How long He, Eliel, was furious with the IGIGI. We, the great Anuna, all of us, agreed together on a plan. Anu and Adad were to guard above. I was to guard the earth below. Where Enki went, he was to undo the chain and set us free. He was to release produce for the people. He was to exercise control by holding the balance. Eliel made his voice heard and spoke to their vizier Nusku. Have the 50 Lahmu heroes fetched for me. Have them brought in to my presence. The 50 Lahmu heroes were fetched for him. The warrior Eliel addressed them. We, the great Anu, all of us, agreed together on a plan. Anu and Adad were to guard above. I was to guard the earth below. Where you went, you were to undo the chain and set us free. You were to release produce for the people. You were to exercise control by holding the balance. The warrior Eliel. Adad made his rain pour down, filled the pasture land, and clouds, veiled. Do not feed his people, and do not give Nisaba's corn, luxury for people to eat. Then the god grew anxious as he sat. In the god's assembly, worry gnawed at him. Enki grew anxious as he sat. In the god's assembly, worry gnawed at him. They were furious with each other, Enki and Eliel. We, the great Anuna, all of us, agreed together on a plan. Anu and Adad were to guard above. I was to guard the earth below. Where you went, you were to undo the chain and set us free. You were to release produce for the people. You were to exercise control by holding the balance. The warrior Eliel. You imposed your loads on man. You bestowed noise on mankind. You slaughtered a god together with his intelligence. You must and create a flood. It is indeed your power that shall be used against your people. You agreed to the wrong plan. Have it reversed. Let us make far-sighted Enki swear an oath. Enki made his voice heard and spoke to his brother gods. Why should you make me swear an oath? Why should I use my power against my people? The flood that you mentioned to me, what is it? I don't even know. Could I give birth to a flood? That is Eliel's kind of work. Let him choose. Let Shulat and Hanish march ahead. Let Erakal pull out the mooring poles. Let Ninurta march. Let him make the weirs overflow. The assembly do not listen to. The gods gave an explicit command. Eliel performed a bad deed to the people. Atra-Hasis made his voice heard and spoke to his master. Atra-Hasis made his voice heard and spoke to his master. Indicate to me the meaning of the dream. Let me find out its portent. Enki made his voice heard and spoke to his servant. You say I should find out in bed. Make sure you attend to the message I shall tell you. Wall, listen constantly to me. Reed Hut, make sure you attend to all my words. Dismantle the house, build a boat, reject possessions, and save living things. The boat that you build, roof it like the Apsu. so that the sun cannot see inside it. Make upper decks and lower decks. The tackle must be very strong, the bitumen strong to give strength. I shall make rainfall on you here, a wealth of birds, a hamper of fish. He opened the sand clock and filled it. He told him the sand needed for the flood was 7 nights' worth. Atra-Hasis received the message. He gathered the elders at his door. Atra-Hasis made his voice heard and spoke to the elders. My God is out of favor with your God. Enki and Enlil have become angry with each other. They have driven me out of my house. Since I always stand in awe of Enki, he told me of this matter. I can no longer stay in. I cannot step my foot on Enlil's territory again. I must go down to the Apsu and stay with my God. That is what he told me. The elders, the carpenter brought his axe, the reed worker brought his stone, a child brought bitumen, the poor fetched what was needed. Everything there was. Pure ones, fat ones, he selected and put on board. The birds that fly in the sky, cattle of Shakan, wild animals of open country, he put on board. He invited his people to feast. He put his family on board. They were eating, they were drinking. But he went in and out, could not stay till or rest on his haunches. His heart was breaking and he was vomiting bile. The face of the weather changed. A god bellowed from the clouds. When he, Atra-Hasis, heard his noise, bitumen was brought and he sealed his door. While he was closing up his door, a god kept bellowing from the clouds. The winds were raging even as he went up, and cut through the rope, he released the boat. Anzu was tearing at the sky with his talons. The land, he broke. The flood came out. The Kaisisu weapon went against the people like an army. No one could see anyone else. They could not be recognized in the catastrophe. The flood roared like a bull. Like a wild ass screaming, the winds howled. The darkness was total. There was no sun. Like white sheep of the flood. The noise of the flood. Anu went berserk. The gods, his sons, before him asked for Nintu, the great mistress. Her lips became encrusted with rhyme. The great gods, the Anuna, stayed parched and famished. The goddess watched and wept. Midwife of the gods, wise mommy. Let daylight, let it return, and however could I, in the assembly of gods, have ordered such destruction with them? Enlil was strong enough to give a wicked order. Like Tiruru, he ought to have cancelled that wicked order. I heard their cry leveled at me, against myself, against my person. Beyond my control, my offspring have become like white sheep. As for me, how am I to live in a house of bereavement? My noise has turned to silence. Could I go away up to the sky and live as in a cloister? What was Anu's intention as decision maker? It was his command that the gods, his sons, obeyed. He who did not deliberate but sent the flood. He who gathered the people to catastrophe. Nintu was wailing. Would a true father have given birth to the rolling sea so that they could clog the river like dragonflies? They're washed up like a raft on a bank. They're washed up like a raft on a bank in an open country. I have seen and wept over them. Shall I ever finish weeping for them? She wept. She gave vent to her feelings. Nintu wept and fueled her passions. The gods wept with her for the country. She was sated with grief. She longed for beer, in vain. Where she sat weeping, there the great gods sat too, but, like sheep, could only fill their windpipes with bleeding. Thirsty as they were, their lips discharged only the rime of famine. For 7 days and 7 nights the torrent, storm and flood came on. He put down, provided food. The gods smelt the fragrance, gathered like flies over the offering. When they had eaten the offering, Nintu got up and blamed them all. Whatever came over Anu who makes the decisions? Did Eliel dare to come for the smoke offering? Those two who did not deliberate but sent the flood, gathered the people to catastrophe? You agreed the destruction. Now their bright faces are dark forever. Then she went up to the big flies, which Anu had made, and declared before the gods, "His grief is mine. My destiny goes with his. He must deliver me from evil and appease me. Let me go out in the morning. Let these flies be the lapis lazuli of my necklace, by which I may remember it daily, forever." The warrior Eliel spotted the boat and was furious with the IGIGI. We, the great Anuna, all of us, agreed together on an oath. No form of life should be escaped. How did any man survive the catastrophe? Anu made his voice heard and spoke to the warrior Eliel. Who but Enki would do this? He made sure that the reed hut disclosed the order. Enki made his voice heard and spoke to the great gods. I did it in defiance of you. I made sure life was preserved. Exact your punishment from the sinner and whoever contradicts your order. I have given vent to my feelings. Eliel made his voice heard and spoke to far-sighted Enki. Come, summon Nintu the womb goddess. Confer with each other in the assembly. Enki made his voice heard and spoke to the womb goddess Nintu. You are the womb goddess who decrees destinies. To the people, let 1/3 of them be. Let another 1/3 of them be. In addition, let there be 1/3 of the people among the people, the woman who gives birth yet does not give birth successfully. Let there be the Pasitu demon among the people to snatch the baby from its mother's lap. Establish Ubabtu and Egesitu woman. They shall be taboo and thus control childbirth. How we sent the flood. But a man survived the catastrophe. You are the counselor of the gods. On your orders I created conflict. Let the IGIGI listen to this song in order to praise you, and let them record your greatness. I shall sing of the flood to all people. Listen. The end.